Hi, I'm your Gemini friend. This video is about Saturn in the third house. So in the description I'll have some more videos on Saturn, what it represents in our chart, just more in depth. And that's also where you can see information on how to get a personal natal chart reading or synastry reading from me. But when it comes to Saturn in the houses, the house that you have Saturn in, it's going to represent the area of life in which you're going to have major responsibilities and potential authority. This house is going to be the most directly affected by discipline, structure, and it's necessary in this area. Saturn's lessons are not easy. We have to learn things the hard way because we're meant to have mastery over this area. But it's often a very heavy thing. It's a heavy feeling that comes with our potential in this area. So while the sign that Saturn is in is going to matter too, this sign is going to show you basically the manner in which you go about discipline, about creating structure, and how that process is embodied for you. But I find that the house is a little more specific since the sign changes every 2.5 to 3 years, while the house is going to be very particular to the individual. And when we're looking at this area of life, it's an area of frequent difficulty, especially for the first 30 years of life. But while I do go over Saturn returns and just a lot more into Saturn in the other videos, briefly put, Saturn is restriction, limitation. It is the big lessons that we have to learn, often caused by external factors, things that it feels like we just can't help, we can't break through. But the point of these boundaries and these limitations is essentially to get things right within those boundaries. And as we progress, as we develop that discipline, the boundaries expand. So what I'm going to go over in this video is initially the struggles that come with this placement, and then the growth process, and then what mastery looks like. So what is the third house? The third house represents our communication, our thoughts, and really our relationship with our immediate environment. This is how perceptive we are, how much we pick up, because it's all about learning and taking in information, creating a more logical understanding of life and how we communicate that. So Saturn always takes patience because it tends to create delays in these areas to make us really stop and look at it, get it right. But when these delays are in the way that we communicate or the way that we think or learn, it can cause a lot of insecurity when it comes to speaking with people, socializing, and even our intelligence. There can be a strong sense of perfectionism here or heaviness that comes with even just trying to get your thoughts across, or this feeling of needing to prove yourself, prove your intelligence. And another thing that is related to the third house is our siblings. Since siblings are usually, if we have them, the first people that we kind of interact with on a social level, and they represent our early environment and the ways that we socialize based off of that. So issues with siblings can come with Saturn in the third house. But even these tend to get better with time, because everything Saturn, it gets better with time so long as we do focus on the lesson. So starting with the struggles that are going to come from this placement. All sorts of difficulty with communication, whether that is getting your thoughts across, feeling like you are misunderstood, like you're being misrepresented or misinterpreted, and this overall self-consciousness about maybe what you have to contribute to the conversation, or maybe the speed at which you think or speak. Maybe there's a general feeling of being like an outsider when it comes to social groups, or even just small talk can feel really hard, because with the weight of the responsibility of Saturn, you likely aren't somebody who wants to do things like small talk because it kind of seems purposeless, surface level, like it really doesn't mean anything, and it might be hard to have that more lighthearted energy when it comes to conversations. The curiosity of the third house, the way that it is perceiving things and picking up on little things, whether that's within your atmosphere or within another person, that curiosity can feel blocked to where it's maybe a little bit harder to just be able to think of things in the moment or even come up with answers to questions in the moment. This comes from like a cautiousness and a sense of pressure because you recognize deep inside that you are meant to be an authority in communication. Your words have weight. but sometimes this can feel like they have too much weight. And it is important to work through that feeling of perfectionism and heaviness that comes with what it is that you have to say. And this can also come with either a real judgment or a feeling of judgment when it comes to your mental capabilities, again, what you have to say, your intelligence. Early authority figures in your life could have put a lot of weight on your intelligence. This can definitely come with extreme academic pressure and sometimes a lot of self-doubt. If you were really broken down early on, told, no, that's wrong, no, you have to do it perfect, that sort of thing can become ingrained just within everyday conversation, like something that you're always carrying around. I think of like blocked throat chakra, working on your throat chakra. Even when you're alone, maybe speaking things out loud. It can be helpful to voice your thoughts when there is nobody to hear them or to judge them, because this can actually show a really deep ability to process things in a way that's a lot more than surface level processing. Because what comes with the weight is, like, imagine things being slowed down and worked through in a much more thorough way. I mean, people who just say things and it feels like there's no pressure on them, that could actually be really frustrating. But it's important to recognize the pressure that you put on yourself and whether or not other people are putting that on you, because likely anybody just wants to hear what you have to say, hear what you have to think, and they're not going to judge every single tiny thing like it's absolutely crucial you get it right. But it can feel like that, especially if you have parents like that, because that can create an inner voice and an inner judge that is constantly scanning everything that you say or that you could potentially say for any potential errors. And that is just a lot to deal with, because it's not just in speaking to people, it's also in your own mind. But this does lead to having incredible discipline over your thoughts. I'll get to that more in mastery. And there can also be this thing within conversation where it could feel like it's not worth it to say something unless you really have something to contribute. Unless there's something worthwhile that you have to say, you could just keep quiet, and it could be frustrating because people could see you as a very quiet person, while you might feel like you're actually a very talkative person when you're with people that you're comfortable with. But finding those situations where you are comfortable speaking more freely, those are wonderful things, and those should be people or situations that you really prioritize, because Saturn is one of those practice makes perfect sorts of energies where the more you are able to practice and get yourself used to letting your thoughts flow and your words flow, the easier it does become in other situations. And it is also important to look at your Mercury placement with this, because Mercury is how we communicate. And especially if you have, like, say, a retrograde Mercury, or your Mercury has a lot of harsh aspects to it, that can not only confirm the difficulty that you might have within communication, but it can actually give you more specifics as to, say, what planets are aspecting it, what other parts of you are affecting this, what is connected, and what could have an overall impact on this part of you. And this is actually a great placement for puzzle solving, problem solving, really putting in the necessary thought. So thinking of yourself and your natal chart as sort of a puzzle in that way, and really investigating your Mercury can help a lot, because Saturn needs confidence and it needs a foundation in order to really thrive. So building a firm foundation of understanding for yourself can really help in this way. I even think of things like, personality categorization things can be helpful, or identifying with a certain archetype. Basically anything that can make you feel less isolated and more like there are other people like you, because this can be a very lonely placement. I think that anything that's kind of fun like that, really any sort of lighthearted learning or word games, puzzles, quizzes, stuff like that, having more fun with your mind can be a helpful thing in lightening up this energy. And that's not to say that you need to be a super lighthearted, quick thinking, quick speaking person who's loose with your words. You are meant to have stability here, and again, authority. So that feeling of responsibility that you feel, it is important, but that's not to say that anyone is going to be judging you as hard as you judge yourself. It's really all about finding a balance, feeling confident enough to communicate, but also taking the way that Saturn weighs things down and using that to put more emphasis on what you say, because there is naturally emphasis on what you say with this placement. You could feel that people really pay attention when you do speak, which is another one of those things that's frustrating if everybody sees you as quiet, and when you do have something to say, all eyes are on you. That's an important thing. That's actually a huge part of the significance of this placement, but I totally get how scary that can be and how frustrating it can feel to be so misunderstood or so misread all the time. It's just important to try to embrace that authority that you naturally have. I mean, the more that somebody over-explains something, just lets their mouth run, that actually tends to indicate more insecurity or just heavy Gemini placements. But what can come with being really choosy with your words is that people do take you more seriously. You just want to find that balance where they're not taking you so seriously that everything feels like it's necessary to make the absolute most perfect choice, because that's what really holds you back, this sense of cautiousness. And I get that this is a tough thing to balance, but it comes with time. Saturn placements always take patience, and the more patience you really give yourself, and also give yourself room for error, that eases the pressure somewhat. But this placement can indicate a lot of like hesitancy, overthinking even, and really increasing the pressure on yourself in that overthinking. So do take care to pay attention to discipline within your mind. Recognize when a thought process is not productive, when it's maybe just dragging you down. That's something to avoid. You want to have thoughts that build you up. And our minds tend to have a very natural way of running. So if you can recognize your natural patterns and see which ones are not working for you, you have the perfect placement for creating discipline within your mind. And by this I mean, like, say every time you have a thought that really puts you going in that negative direction, just cut it off there. Increasing your awareness of your thoughts, of which thoughts are even yours, and maybe which thoughts were developed more as a coping mechanism or a protection defense mechanism, that can really help with this by cutting off those unnecessary negative thoughts. And since the third house also does deal with our siblings and also our neighbors, the people who are around us in a sort of lighthearted social way, this can indicate issues or even just a feeling of pressure or uncomfortableness when you're in these situations or within these interactions. You could feel a strong sense of like responsibility and kind of a distance from the more lighthearted social engagements that people tend to go through. It could feel kind of like standing on the outside and looking in, feeling like you don't belong there. So it is important to take up space within conversations. Insert your thoughts when you have them rather than holding them back. It takes time and it takes building up your comfortability with that, but the more you do it, the easier it gets. And a big thing with this, you have to allow yourself to make mistakes, because with such logical energy, there's a strong desire to get things perfect, accurate. Accuracy is a huge thing here, but the more you allow yourself to make little mistakes, the less scary it becomes when you're in any situation where you might make a mistake. And you can always start slow and easy in situations with people that you're comfortable with, that you know aren't going to judge you, even if it feels like they might. It's you judging yourself. And the more that you become comfortable with making a mistake, the more people are going to see, oh, they're confident in what they say, and they're not going to question you. There is this strong pressure that comes with resisting things. It's kind of hard to describe, but when say you make a mistake or you're feeling uncomfortable and you're around people, there is this feeling of shame, embarrassment, self-consciousness really, that the more we resist and we try to control ourselves in this situation, we try to hold it together, we try not to do whatever it is that we might naturally do when we make a mistake, the more you can just lean into that. The best example I can think of is like blushing. Of course, if somebody makes a mistake, they might blush or flush, whatever the difference is. But the more you resist that or try to hide it, the harder it gets and the worse it's going to be. If you can just, in that moment, embrace it, like, okay, I feel like this, I cannot tell you how much faster it goes away. It's that resistance and that holding way too strongly to our composure that actually makes things worse. So whatever sort of response you might have, even if it's more of an anxiety thing or like a nervous response to something, by not resisting it and just allowing it, that takes the pressure off of yourself to really hold it together in a way that can just allow the emotions to flow, the chemicals to flow, just let it flow. I know that it's harder than it sounds, but resistance to what is currently happening, that actually causes a lot of our problems in life. And this one is specifically in social situations or even within your own mind. But this is more about like embracing who you are in the moment, self-acceptance, and really embracing your flaws, because everybody has flaws. Everybody in the world has flaws. There's no way around that. You're never going to be perfect. You're not supposed to be perfect. But the good thing about this is nobody expects you to be perfect. You could expect yourself to be perfect, but that's cruel. Would you expect anyone else in your life to be perfect? That's too much pressure to put on a person, so definitely don't put it on yourself. So when it comes to the growth process with this, it is very important to teach yourself that your ideas are valuable. What you have to say is actually highly valuable. And it doesn't have to be perfect to be valuable. It really is important to voice your thoughts anyway. Even if it's an incomplete thought, even if it's just an idea and you haven't perfected it, somebody else could latch onto that and it can create a brilliant snowball. So keeping your ideas and your thoughts to yourself, what that does is it creates like a backup. And the more you have clogging your natural flow, not only is it harder for things to get by, but you can also have like a total burst of everything coming out at once rather than having that slow and steady energy that you're meant to have. And one wonderful thing about the third house, this is the student energy. So being like an eternal student, really focusing on learning and curiosity rather than accuracy and knowing everything. That eases things up so much, because then you can have a conversation with absolutely anybody about anything and you can just ask. You don't have to be the authority on every single thing. You don't have to know everything in order to be a valuable person or an interesting person or a smart person. The smartest people are asking questions. They want to know more. They don't think that they know it all. Because once you think you know it all, then, there's no more room for growth. There's no room for further learning. And nobody knows everything. It's impossible. So really taking on that student role is actually how you eventually embody the teacher role. But I think the best teachers are also students. And of course, the more you know, the more foundational knowledge you've created for yourself, and just really keeping that curiosity alive and looking into something when you're interested in it, or if somebody says something and you don't know about it, ask them. There is absolutely no pressure to know everything, but it can feel like that. It definitely can. Especially if you were treated poorly because of your perceived intelligence, or even praised for your intelligence. This can absolutely be a situation where the pressure that you felt early on, just because you are smarter than everybody else when you're younger, doesn't mean that you always have to continue to be that. The thing about children is that they're curious, they're perceptive, they want to know things, and some people just learn faster than others. Everyone has their own way of doing things and of processing things, and if your processing was really quick early on in life, and then people catch up with you, that's nothing to be ashamed of. Everybody has their own relationship with their cognitive abilities. Everybody is meant to be the way that they are because we all have different skills and strengths and interests and all of that. So really lean into who you are and accept everybody else for who they are, because the more that we make intellectual judgments of other people, we're really just judging ourselves. If you look at somebody and you think like, they didn't do that right, I'm glad I'm smarter, I'm glad I didn't make that mistake, what that's really telling yourself is you can't make mistakes. You have to be the smartest. And that kind of thing, it's heavy. It's too heavy. It weighs you down. And it prevents you from really embracing that student mentality. And another huge part of the growth process is just letting your thoughts flow, letting your words flow, and work through that fear of being misunderstood or misrepresented or judged. The more that you can just let things flow authentically, the easier it becomes. The tongue is a muscle too. I don't have anything to back that up, but I know the tongue is a muscle, so work it out in your own way. And there's a special balance to find here between the flexibility of free-flowing thought and the structure that you're naturally able to create. So don't put pressure on yourself for needing to do things faster or in a different way. Work with what you have, work with what comes naturally to you, and improve that. There's no pressure to be anybody else or to think like anybody else. What you have to contribute, your thoughts are so unique. You're the only person with your brain and your formative experiences that kind of created who you are, along with who you are naturally. So nobody has this specific combination like you do. And that's why what you have to say is so valuable. So let's look at what mastery looks like with this. This is an ability to communicate with clarity and with structure and in a way that people are really going to be able to strongly comprehend, but also receive in a way that's like, it's deeper than just the words. Just your speech itself or your writing, however it is that you communicate. There are so many different ways to communicate. I don't want to say that this is just all about speech, but however it is that you get your thoughts out into the world, there is wisdom there and there's that authority. People understand that you know what you're talking about, but you can't reach this position if you don't work your way up to it. And this is something that comes with time naturally. So long as you don't hold yourself back, you don't let the weight of Saturn crush you, you will make it there. And this also comes with intellectual endurance and like super deep focus, an ability to focus and to comprehend that is beyond the average capability. Your knowledge, the wisdom that you create from your experiences and from your understanding, this is something that is respected. You could be respected in teaching, in writing, in speaking, and just in all intellectual matters. You are meant to be respected in this area. But it does take respecting yourself and respecting your own unique way of communicating. Really embody your Mercury sign, your Mercury house. Pay strong attention to that because that's how you're intended to be communicating, and it might be different from what is expected or from the norms. But one of the most valuable assets that anybody can have is discipline over our thoughts. So creating that thought discipline, this is something you're meant to do. Because when we recognize which thoughts are good for us, which thoughts are not ours, what is a productive thought pattern, those things shape everything. I mean, we're thinking all the time. And so many of our thoughts just pass by without even that conscious awareness. So having more conscious awareness of your thoughts, this is so powerful. And this also indicates an ability to form very deep and meaningful relationships with people within your community, being seen within your community as somebody that people can go to for advice, for wisdom, for understanding. It's just felt by others. They can feel your knowledge. So mastering Saturn really comes with just an intellectual authority presence. But this comes from a deep look at yourself and a deep willingness to understand yourself and to embrace yourself in your natural flow and to allow it. Because the saddest thing with this placement is being absolutely brilliant, but not sharing that, not getting it out in some way. We need your message. We need what it is that you have to share, what it is that you're thinking. You are meant to be somebody deeply influential. It's just about finding your own way of doing this and creating a firm foundation, taking your time, having patience with yourself, and not judging yourself. That judgment is so huge because thought discipline, so much of our thoughts can be judgments. And like I said before, even just judging other people, that really shows us what we're judging about ourselves and what we judge in general, what standards we're holding ourselves to. But just having Saturn in your third house tells me you can do it. Whatever it is for you, you can do it, you can excel at it, and you can be recognized for it. So that's what I have to say with this one. Just don't hold your thoughts back. I want to know them. I want to know what it is that you have to share. And, if you have this placement, please let me know what your experience has been with this, if you relate to any of this. Thank you so much. Thank you for watching. I greatly, greatly appreciate you, and I love you. Bye.